Is it okay to have expectations in love? Welcome to an original exploration of everyday moral dilemmas with philosopher Professor Clancy Martin and spiritual guide Daaji.
Today's lecture is a particularly interesting subject, one of particular interest also to me. I've spent a lot of time working on this question. And the question is basically about the intersection of morality and love. And one way of posing it is it okay to have expectations of the people that we love? We sometimes talk about this notion of unconditional love. And I remember my father used to always tell me, "Oh, Clancy, I love you unconditionally." And at some level I accepted that. I was like, okay, this is the one place where I'm going to get unconditional love, was from my dad, also from my mom. Although my mom, a very different person than my father, and I don't think my mother would ever say something like "I love you unconditionally." She's too sophisticated about the concept of love. She would say, "No, yes, I love you, and I love you conditionally." And there are this whole set of conditions that I have that. But at the same time, she would also say something like, "I'm quite sure, no matter what you do, no matter what you say, I'm still going to love you, Clance. I could be disappointed in you, I could be angry at you, I could be upset with you, but I'll still love you." So in some sense, I almost feel like my mother is a closer approximation of unconditional love than my father. My father is no longer with us. He died quite some time ago, when he was about my age, actually, the age I am now. I've written a book about this question of the way love relates to morality and how we think about the question of the good life, and written a couple of books about it, actually. And in the history of moral thinking on the question of love, it is very often framed the other way. That is to say, the question of is it okay to expect things from the people we love is very often framed as, what ought the people I love to expect from me? And what does it mean for me that I love those people? Kierkegaard, the great Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard, famously said that one can never be deceived in love. Which is a strange claim to make, isn't it? Because we so often think that we have been deceived in love, or that we have deceived in love. And of course, when we do think about that, we're generally thinking about romantic love. But it's not just in romantic love that we deceive in love. We deceive our parents, we deceive all of our loved ones. So, and when we do, we perhaps rely on the fact that they love us in order to deceive them, or when we are deceived by them, we are in some sense deceived because of our love. We trust them so much because of our love, and then they deceive us. Should we be able to expect the truth from them? And in fact, because we love them and we expect the truth from them, is that how they deceive us? And then Kierkegaard says, one can never be deceived in love. In love, one can never be deceived. What does he mean? Well, for Kierkegaard, thinking about love he thinks that the fundamental nature of love is like a gift. It is something that you can give to a person. You can say, "I love you." And you can never be deceived in offering a gift. in accepting a gift from someone and accepting someone's love, of course you could be deceived. They could be offering you a false gift. But in loving them in return, you are merely giving them the gift of love back. Again, you can never be deceived. In giving a gift, you can never be deceived. In accepting a gift, of course, you could be deceived. If someone could say that this is the gift that I'm giving you, and it is not actually the gift they are giving you, they're giving you something different. But that, for Kierkegaard, is not love. For Kierkegaard, love is by its nature, and this is all that it is. It is a gift that you are giving someone else. So for Kierkegaard to say, can I have expectations from the people I love? He would say that's the wrong way to think about love. He would say, the people that you love, it is an activity of loving that you are doing, and they are going to be the people that they are quite independently. So this, I think, is this kind of notion that my father intended, although probably maybe, it's a very high standard. As Kierkegaard himself points out, Kierkegaard says, look, this is the way love works. I'm not saying that we all love ideally in that way. I'm just saying this is the nature of love. This is the standard to which we should hold ourselves when we say, I love. So for Kierkegaard, the answer would be no. You really can't have expectations from the people that you love.
Can you love someone without expecting anything from them?
This is such an important topic. You could say it as old as time itself. Unconditional love is selfless in nature. When we contemplate the nature of unconditional love, what emerges? It's something universal, irrespective of cultures or philosophies or age. When there is selfless love, the other person occupies primary priority in our mind and hearts, and we engage with them for no ulterior motive whatsoever. The feeling in the heart is that of elation, joy, and such a peace that there is no space for heartbreak. When you see the object of your love is in trouble, you feel pain and would do anything for them, isn't it? At the same time, there is absolute freedom and almost zero expectations. It is practically divine in nature. Let me share a little story with you by James Dodson. It is entitled 1,000 Kisses. The author had a friend who was rather poor. He had lost his wife at the birth of his little daughter, and soon, with his loving care, the little one grew up to be 5 or 6. One Christmas Eve, the child took some golden wrapping from her mother's cupboard that used to remain protectively close by her father. The father, who cherished each thing that reminded him of his dear wife, was irritated at the child for having touched her mother's things. He said to her, with a bit of harshness in his voice, "Put that back. You are wasting the wrapping paper anyway." It kind of spoiled their Christmas. Tears spilled over this little child's cheeks, and she looked crestfallen, but managed to say, "Daddy, I was wrapping a Christmas gift for you." He felt abashed, and trying to patch up with his rash reaction, he said, "It's okay, darling. You just go ahead." At night, she wrapped the box, and on Christmas morning, she beamingly and proudly presented it to her father, wishing her Merry Christmas, wishing him Merry Christmas. He opened it with care, but To his surprise, the box was empty. So now he was back to his primary irritation. See, I told you that you have wasted the paper. There is nothing in this box after all. She looked up at his angry face and said very softly, though she was filled with sorrow and tears, "Daddy, I packed 1,000 kisses in it. It took me all night to pack them." And you know what? The father cherished that box and kept that box beside his bed all his life. So you see, to my understanding, love, when it demands nothing, is pure. Love is so tender. At the first expectation or demand to it, the heart kind of begins to wilt. Let's further explore this using the concept of science of entropy. Entropy consists of gradual decline into disorder of any given system when energy input is no longer provided. As in the law of thermodynamics, entropy reflects the instability of a system over a period of time if there is no energy input to keep it in a good state, in a stable condition. In human relationship also, when we let things build up, such as emotions and reactions, we get inwardly disorganized in some manner. Over time, we are likely to harbor things like anger or irritation or resentment, regret, guilt. And one day, we cannot just take it anymore. There comes a time when the pressure builds up so much that we could explode with those stored emotions or simply give up and walk away from that relationship. Many of our expectations, unconscious or conscious, are not met with. They are troublesome. And we feel unloved. Expectations tend to build up over time. As in entropy, here too we need an input of love energy to stabilize relationships. So to me, when constant input is required to stabilize a relationship, it denotes a lack of love. Imagine you have to bring every evening half a dozen roses or a dozen roses and present to your beloved just to keep him or her happy. Bribing with flowers. When we cultivate an inclination to develop an attitude of acceptance from heart, the entire equation changes. We can be loving enough to accept the foibles or welcome the discomfort of another person's behavior that does not match our expectations, so that we continue to provide space for them to exist in their own way, in their own space. That is the beginning of real love. We can love others without expectations. The trick is to learn to focus on improving ourselves on a constant basis. Instead of expecting the other person to match up to our standards, it is better to learn how to become more accepting of the other. Loving someone means all about unconditional acceptance. In other words, it is all about letting go of our expectations. You want to be happy? This is the only way. Consider the other person is never ever going to change and live with that belief. Meditation practice is a huge help, as in how we focus on improving ourselves. A natural empathy and compassion is born in a generous heart that expands with each meditation. With each inner exercise of clearing out the debris of our emotional baggage, we start afresh. New beginning each time. So instead of self-centered responses, we shift to culling our personal demands in an attempt to regulate ourselves. As and how that happens, a natural acceptance of the other is born. We graduate into a state of love and resonance with inner peace that can help others also to find a measure of calm and respect. That is a sure way to raise beyond expectations and find love as a constant input so that our relationships stabilize and are built on such a firm foundation.
Kierkegaard thought there was one place where you could have expectations in loving, and that is in the love for Kierkegaard. Kierkegaard was a Christian philosopher. The love between a human being and God. In loving God, Kierkegaard thought that was the one place where you could have an expectation, that you are allowed to demand of God her or his love in return. Kierkegaard thought you could demand, but that it would be up to God whether or not your understanding of the love of God would be given to you, which is called, in Kierkegaard's terms, grace, and that's when you get faith. And he said that's just up to God. You just have to wait for it. Either you're going to get it or you're not going to get it. You don't know, you have to wait, but you can demand it. And he thought it was reasonable to demand it. And in fact, that was part of the process, was to demand it and expect it. But other expectations, no. He thought you couldn't have them, not in love.
Is it okay to expect grace from God?
If not from God, from whom can one expect grace? Is there any other source? It won't be grace then. I would rather focus on invoking grace. How to? To my experience, grace descends on every special moment, one of which is when you are empty. Let me share with you, with a small example, that if the vessel is upside down, the pot is upside down, how can you fill up your pot with rainwater? It goes on raining, but your pot is upside down. In order to receive grace from God, first requisite is the total openness of the heart. Make sure your heart is not busy with this and that and all sorts of desire. Desires serve as deflectors to grace. If you are sad, morose, ruminating over your own pain and grief, that too will deflect grace. Cheerful heart only can attract grace. However open-hearted you may be, the direction of your openness must be centered towards God. Inward centering is a must. If you want to capture sunlight, you better keep your solar panels at 90 degrees facing the sun. Having done all that, be receptive. It is when there is total eclipse of that sacred heart with mine, we become worthy receptacle for His grace to descend. The saint, mystic and icon of devotion, Rabia of Basra, she used to pray saying, "O Lord, if I adore you out of fear of hell, burn me. If I adore you out of desire for paradise, lock me out of paradise. But if I adore you for yourself alone, don't deny me, your eternal beauty. So there can be no question of expectation, even of grace from God. Love is to give, ever and evermore. Can it even conceive of asking for anything? Grace is beautiful divine love that is felt when one attracts the attention and presence of God. A heart that is yielding attracts joy, happiness, and cheerfulness. That in turn invokes grace. Grace is not something that you ask for. Of course, undercurrents are always that He is the only one who is the source of grace. Yet we do not and we cannot demand grace. It flows in when a vacuum is created in the heart, when we clear the inner space of our expectations and desires, of prejudices and opinions. We begin to invite something lighter, greater, something sublime and radiant. Grace is pulled naturally by our humility and surrender, with cheerful acceptance of life. Then gratitude also blossoms in the heart. Per contra, if you keep complaining, God being partial, then what happens? Even if grace did descend, you will not be in a position to even make note of it. It is like creating an area of low pressure. Without low pressure in the atmosphere, even the wind cannot blow. The airflow is possible because of the difference in atmospheric pressure. When we create low pressure, a vacuum in our hearts, grace descends. Attacking, complaining is not about creating inner receptivity. We all begin somewhere. I may not have faith to start with. I may not even believe in the first place about God and His grace. But slowly, as we move on with neutral mindset, we begin to perceive reality of existence. If I am too positive about godly presence, because of indoctrination through borrowed knowledge from books and other external sources, then one remains falsely satisfied with this belief system. This is illusion of presence of God. If I am totally averse to the idea of God, then too I am concluding too fast. So, need to first come to a neutral point and then pray. Pray to God. God, I really don't know you. I never felt your presence. I don't even know if you are there at all. If you are there, please let me have some experience, some glimpse in the divinity. This can be the beginning of authentic relationship with the divine.
Love is a very broad term. The ancient Greeks had at least 4 different words that we standardly translate as love: Eros, Agape, Philia, and Storge. Storge was what we would now call something like domestic love, the love that exists in a family, particularly between a husband and a wife, a love that, or between 2 partners who make up a family, a love that consists in a large part of shared responsibility, shared duties, the care of a family and the care of a household. And in Storge, of course, there are so many. Storge is in some sense made up of the expectations that we have of the people that we love. So in Storge, yes, my partner, Amy, she has many expectations of me, and her love is intimately involved with those expectations of me to do certain kinds of things that that constitute the possibility of our domestic life. And similarly, I have many expectations of her. And insofar as either of us fail in these expectations, if we want the Storge to continue, we need to talk about it and talk about those expectations and see if they can be modified, find places to meet in the middle. And Storge can exist, of course, between other members of a family as well.
We have expectations from all our relationships. But if they are not met, can we still retain love?
This form of love called philia that you described earlier is love in the form of friendship, full of respect. It is the love of blood siblings and true companions. It is a sacred trust that is built over time between two persons. Eastern tradition recognizes this as a combination of Bhatru-bhav as well as Maitri-bhav. Bhatru-bhav is affinity between siblings, and Maitri-bhav is relationship between friends. Think of it as a model of true acceptance. Life in some way is all about acceptance. Generously speaking, I accept your non-acceptance of what I am trying to convey. When we learn the art of accepting whatever comes to us in life, it is the act of acceptance that makes any situation, however difficult, transform itself into that is beneficial and successful to all. Who amongst us can claim perfection? So, while we are ridden with our own faults, it is easy to look at the fault of others and fall into the trap of expectations. You can also ask, how well do I accept my own faults? Does it help to accept everything about yourself without changing? Then how will you improve and evolve? Here comes the next question. How well do I accept the faults of others and the circumstances around me? We accept certain situations with joy while rejecting certain situations that brings us discomfort or pain, or that may not match with our expectations. Our hearts narrow down when acceptance bids goodbye. Should it be as non-creative? What I mean is that once I accept my weaknesses, where will be the opportunity of correcting myself? Likewise, with others, some expressions or disagreement is vital for overall growth, overall flourishing, or mutual growth. I often feel that we can learn to deal with such things whenever any situation in our environment demands acceptance. Let's take an attitude of seeing how far we can go. Keep thinking, keep trying to accept with full alertness and awareness. The number one step in acceptance is to let go of personal opinions in order to come to a neutral and a midpoint. Whenever you want guidance from within, first come to the neutral point, and then there is a possibility that you are steered in the right direction. Doing the right thing then becomes an eventuality. The inner compass that we have so far been discussing can then be used to find true north, and we can chart a course where greater harmony and peace can prevail. That is why the family environment is considered the best for learning to love and to sacrifice. We sacrifice our convictions, our desires, and suspend our judgments on how things ought to be. When we find the space of neutrality, a burden is lifted. We let go of our prejudices and preconceptions, and we are able to see with a clear vision. When the choice we make is right, the heart feels lighter. Per contra, when the direction is not right, the heart would feel heavier. Acceptance and responsibility then can begin to achieve a certain balance. And the longer we exercise our abilities, our spiritual wealth earned through experiences of letting go, of maintaining inner equilibrium, the more we become established in our relationships, we begin to enjoy the heavenly gifts. It is natural and all-encompassing. Our hearts, they would expand, and we can be capable of loving ourselves and the others with confidence. So you see, it is rising above expectation and cheerfully accepting all that comes our way that gives us the inner strength to hold ourselves to higher moral standards day after day. Look at it from another angle. What else is true friendship or brotherhood if not a complete acceptance of the other while looking out for their highest good, knowing full well that we all originate from the same source, same parents. On a larger scale, the whole universe is from the same source, one God.
Philia is fundamentally the love between siblings, and can also be the love naturally between friends, and is most often talked about, in fact, is the love between friends, but also is the love between siblings. And there again, we may have expectations of the beloved, of the ones that we love. It's okay to have expectations of them. We love them. We in fact suppose that in loving them they will have expectations of us, but we have expectations of them in return. And that is a kind of expectation of seeking each other's mutual benefit, trying to do the good for the beloved and expecting the beloved to do the good for us in return. Now, ideally, is particularly in the ancient Greek conception of this, we would reach a stage at which point we would, in our philia, seek their good quite independent of whether or not they were also seeking our good. That is, in a lot of our exchanges, they're not in philia, they're not exactly transactional, but it's sort of like, well, I'm part of my always trying to seek your good is that I know you will also try to seek my good. So it's not exactly transactional, but there's this kind of mutual understanding of expectation and of trying to satisfy the other's expectation. And we're familiar with this. This is the way love between friends operates. But in Aristotle's view, and in the view of a lot of ancient Greeks, this would kind of progressively elevate until there was a point at which you no longer really thought about the question of whether you were benefiting in any way from having this person as a friend, except insofar as this person is your friend. And I have friendships like that, both with my brothers and with other friends, and I'm sure all of you do too. I have many of these not many, only a few of these friendships. For Aristotle, as for many other Greek philosophers, sort of by definition, you would only have a few of these friendships, that because the bar is set quite high for love here, that you kind of go beyond expectations. It's okay to have expectations of them, but that's no longer really the point of the friendship. You just want to, in this highest level of friendship, you want to do the good for this person because they are your friend, and that's it. They may have expectations of you. Do you really have expectations of them anymore? Well, maybe you do, maybe you don't, but that's definitely not the point. But those friendship, that's for the ancient Greeks, is a very high level of friendship that you will attain with only a few people in your life. They will be the sort of cherished few friends to whom you are closest. And most of your friends will be people where there is, as I say, not exactly a transactional nature of the love between you, and it still makes sense to speak of it as love, but it is a kind of part of the friendship, part of the love is this recognition that I have certain expectations of you, of which you are fulfilling, you have certain expectations of me, and we do have this kind of back and forth, which is not strictly speaking transactional, because we're not worrying about the keeping accounts on it. We're not worrying to see who's in credit, who's in debit. That's not how we think about it.
How can we train ourselves to transcend expectations in a relationship?
You can have the expression of affinity towards your own children, which is unique in itself. Affinity towards parents and elders, towards spouse, can have its own unique expression. Affinity towards God, or Son of God, or the spiritual masters, can have its own way of expression. This affinity can be compared with electric current. When this current passes through a heater, it gives you warmth. When it passes through the air conditioner, it gives you cool air. It can heat up stuff in your microwave oven, or it can cool or freeze stuff in your refrigerator. Current is the same. Thus, the affinity can express itself in many ways depending upon whom we are expressing our affinity. Vibrations of an affinity will change. With the divine, it will have some sentiments. With elders or parents, it will have its own unique signature. With your spouse, it will have its own yet another level of signature. It is the pure form of love that is naturally unconditional. Whether you're loving a child or spouse or God or Guru or Son of God. The moment you begin to ask and begin to expect, it's no longer love. I remember often citing an example where a mother who wakes up in the middle of night to console her, or soothe, or feed her baby, does not give a thought that, oh, I had to wake up and I was disturbed and etc. She doesn't complain. It is natural to her to attend to this, however disturbing it may be, to her sleep. But if it is the father, you all know that, who does that very same thing, I often observe that they make a huge story out of it the next morning. To a mother, caring and nurturing a child is so natural. Her connection to her child is selfless. That is why in almost all traditions, be it Western or Indian tradition, we have the notion that motherhood is closest to God, and one must consider the mother akin to God. Respect for the mother and the father are the foremost dharma or a holy duty of the children as prescribed by the Vedas. Here the mother may have expectations that her child be a good person and become what she dreams for it to be. Yet, whatever the child becomes, her love is so real, it is intact, even if her expectations are not fulfilled. Have you noticed that when a mother is complaining about her child, you may empathize with her? But God forbid, if you criticize the child in the same words as she does, she immediately tends to become protective and defensive of her child. Why? Because although she is in her right to expect good behavior and success for her child, she accepts it. She accepts in entirety whatever the child is. That is mother's love. And that is why disciples of yoga are advised to consider the guru or the guide as their mother and develop a relationship of a mother and a child. This can induce a true environment of a teacher and a disciple relationship. Babuji Maharaj, my beloved master, he would say that the conception of a guru as a mother is by far one of the most appropriate and advantageous for a seeker of spirituality. A mother is the very embodiment of love and affection. Only a mother's heart can forbear the patience on all the difficulties that a child faces trying so hard to spare it any sorrows or pain. She is forever trying to shield it from harm. A true spiritual master or a guru is as much concerned about the welfare of his disciple. The master feels responsible. He feels responsible for the spiritual development of the child, of the disciple. But not only. He worries for every little thing of all that transpires in disciple's life. In his concern for the disciple, the guru prepares him or her so as to be a fit receptacle of the attention of God, the Great Father, with whom the guru, in his role as a spiritual mother, is so closely connected. The guru actually draws the attention of God on his disciple. The guru and God both can be understood when one holds their love to the same mold as that of the mother. The conception of the guru as a spiritual mother promotes within us the sentiments of love, reverence, surrender, acceptance, which are the sustaining ingredients or the vitamins for the development of our spiritual body.
Then there is Eros, erotic love. And of course, erotic love, a friend of mine has just written a book, a good, great, very, very gifted public philosopher by the name of John Kaag. Some of you may be familiar with John Kaag's public philosophy, one of my very, very dear friends. I love John and love and admire his work. And he has written a book about the conditions of love. I don't know, I know it hasn't come out yet. I'm not quite sure when it's going to come out, but he's playing with this phrase of unconditional love and then the conditions of love. And he's talking about the conditions in this book of erotic love, primarily. And yes, of course, when we are romantically involved with someone, we've got all kinds of conditions. I mean, that's when the conditions really come out. We talked previously in these lectures about jealousy and all those difficulties. And yes, when it comes to romantic love, we have so many conditions. Now, ought we to have so many conditions when it comes to romantic love? Or would we be better off with a version of romantic love that was less conditional? You know, bell hooks, who is one of the great thinkers on love, argues that to move increasingly towards such a fundamental respect for the other person that you will have no expectations at some level. Well, you can have expectations, but your love is not predicated upon those expectations. That is just what it is to love. And that romantic love at its best will liberate us from expectations of the beloved. And I think this is an ideal that we should strive for. Certainly when Iris Murdoch, for example, talks about love, one of the great 20th century thinkers on love, she talks about a kind of thinking about how we care for that person's interests, the beloved's interests, and maximally trying to kind of view ourselves as having their interests in common, even in romantic love. And again, there I think we have an ideal worth pursuing. But sometimes I also want to say that there's such a thing as kind of, as I've called it before, ordinary human love. And in ordinary human love, particularly in romantic love, we're going to have lots of expectations of ourselves, expectations of the beloved. There's going to be expectations running all over the place, all kinds of demands, crazy, some of them justifiable, some of them unjustifiable. And I think, for my part, yes, of course, those are okay. And they may even be part of the fabric of the love. And that's okay. I mean, that's living life as a human being. Romantic love is crazy. It's volatile. It's wild. Why is it volatile? Why is it wild? Why is it crazy? Well, a lot of it has to do with all these expectations that are running around all over the place. And I think those are okay. You know, I mean, this is a wonderful thing in our lives, romantic love. So let's not try to monkey with it too much. Let's not try to change it too much. Let's let it be crazy. Let it be wild. Let it be full of expectations. Why not? We can be allowed to have this one area in our lives where things are a little bit out of control, and expectations are part of that out of control. Now, we do want to be careful, I think, because romantic love can become dangerous. It can become violent. It can become controlling. It can become morally blameworthy. And so we do need to also, at the same time, think about those expectations and think about bear in mind a fundamental respect for the autonomy of the other person, and that our expectations should not interfere with the autonomy of that other person. We should not try to control other people. You know, once we start trying to control other people, once we start interfering with their autonomy, I think Kant is right, then we start controlling their very ability to be moral beings, and then we are treating them, instrumentally. We are treating them like slaves. We are treating them in a truly blameworthy way. We're no longer treating them like human beings at all, and the free moral agents that they are. So we have to be careful. We don't want to go too far with these expectations. When your expectations start controlling someone else, really controlling her or his behavior, you're in morally blameworthy territory, possibly very morally blameworthy territory. So you need to keep an eye on it. But also, I think a little bit of craziness, a little bit of expectation is okay.
A romantic relationship is often filled with expectations. So is it still truly love?
This is one of the questions that millions ask themselves and find it challenging, that a romantic relationship is often filled with expectation. Would you still call it love? How to answer that one? What you already called Eros is a profound celebration of two souls coming together in a union of hearts. That is one of the ultimate expressions of human love. It is a ground for the creation of a family wherein humans come closest to their own maker. Reverence and love in such a relationship can do wonders if the union is built with the purpose and sanctified in the eyes of all. I like to give an example where one day I happened to observe an elderly couple taking a stroll along the river in Princeton. They were quietly walking, and their steps seemed to be in sync. It was evident that they had been together for a long time. They hardly spoke. Their togetherness was expressed in a very subtle way. Eventually, they reached a park bench overlooking the river, pulled out a flask of a tea and some sandwiches, and together they enjoyed that packages of sandwiches in perfect silence. Their movements were so in tune, it seemed for a moment like one person was walking. The way she poured the tea was full of gentleness and care, And the way he received the cup, it was heartwarming to witness. They had reached a stage in their marriage of purity and connection and communion. Did this happen as a result of a life full of perfect harmony and ease? In fact, it is rather the opposite. Only when you have withstood the test of time, over arguments and strife, due to living together and adjusting to each other's expectations and shortcomings, that we evolve to a stage where such a state of synchronicity is achieved. Although we tend to glorify the beginning of love as being a magical moment, it is after evolving to this stage in the relationship by going through the struggles and difficulties, by sacrificing their personal wishes, and by raising children, grandchildren, and sometimes great grandchildren, that love is magnified to divine proportions. So, which one is better? The exciting early days of romance or the serene days of an elderly couple? To my heart, both are relevant and both matter. It is a vital question due to the fact that today most romantic relationships and marriages in the West and increasing number in the East, they do not last the distance. When people fall in love, at the beginning they are so overwhelmed with that emotion and they find even the mistakes of their partner so enchanting. This is in the beginning. It is what you described as going a bit crazy with this intoxication of being romantically involved with someone. That is, they call it love is blind. One loses discerning intelligence. After the joyous whirlwind, however, the reality of life begins to strike home. You must have watched, this Everybody Loves Raymond. Observe the fun of romance seeking fragile emotions of Ray and a more refined and stable emotional intelligence of Deborah. Each time you wonder how long this foolish fellow will last with Deborah. But there it is. The maturity or the ability to adapt makes the couple survive the test of time. We gradually begin to notice our own needs that we give up to be with the other person. And as the ego raises its hood, our capacity to sacrifice our needs begins to reduce. At the same point in time, we feel suffocated and judgmental. Our expectations begin to take over the level of acceptance. When two imperfect beings come together, there is bound to be friction that will demand adjustment. It is often not at the beginning or the end that romantic relationships or marriages falter, but in the middle when the struggles are the greatest. So, what makes love possible in spite of expectations? In yogic philosophy, we concern ourselves with three human classifications or types: Satvik, Rajasic, and Tamasic. We are all a mixture of two extremes, but generally one predominates in our overall inner makeup, and this can change as we evolve. What are these three characteristics? Tamasic behavior is characterized by ignorance and inertia, laziness, sloth. Tamasic person is prone to violence and mistrust. Rajasic behavior is characterized by action and passion. A Rajasic person is one who is often focused on satisfying his own personal desires, gain, and prosperity. The higher category, Satvik behavior, is characterized by purity and wisdom. A Sattvic person cheerfully serves others without any expectations of personal benefit. These three qualities pervade everything we do: the way we walk, the way we talk and eat, and even the way we breathe. These qualities play out in all our relationship with others and are very evident in our closest relationships. A tamasic relationship is based on individual gain. The couple is coming together for some sort of personal gain. Expectations reign supreme. For example, one of the two might be focused solely on the financial status of the other person or gaining a trophy partner. Such an alliance is transactional in nature, based on narcissistic or self-centered behavior, and can easily result in mutual distrust and discord. A spouse becomes a commodity to provide status, pleasure, or service. Most relationships are rajasic in nature, based on mutual love, mutual respect, and also to a certain extent on mutual desire and benefits. But although there may be mutual respect, the love is not totally pure and unconditional, as there are still so many expectations still involved in this relationship. So when both persons are flawed and imperfect, as we all are, there is often a lot of disappointment and heartbreaks. A sattvic relationship is one in which the two partners don't think of themselves individually, but as one. They cheerfully sacrifice everything for the relationship and for the sake of each other. In a sattvic state of affairs, there is purity of intent and no concern about material attributes. Communion, mutual growth, and unconditional love are the core of such a relationship, be it romantic or otherwise. What do you imagine will happen to a person who is self-focused, who wants his or her spouse to constantly shower attention? And what will happen to a person who is always happy to give and does not need to be center of attention? Here is an example of different responses leading to different results. So, romantic relationships often cannot withstand scenarios like financial hardship, ill health of another spouse, or problems with children, death in the family, or worries at work, etc., unless one of the person has predominantly sattvic inclination. Relationships rarely thrive. Love is sustained in a we culture, not while one has me first attitude. Life together over the years can bring about a shared evolution. The rough edges are made smoother. Acceptance blossoms over time, and both learn from each other how to be in harmony and stillness. This has nothing to do with getting used to each other. That will be too superficial a statement. That is, as long as they are both willing to stay together through all the ups and downs of a relationship by working on themselves. It is simply as that. Remember the fairy tale Beauty and the Beast, in which the beast starts out very tamasic, imprisons the beauty ballet, and locks her away as a trophy. But over time, the kindness, love, and acceptance of ballet transforms him into a handsome, gentle prince. We love these fairy tales for the very reason that they inspire us to achieve lofty heights in our relationships. So, Eros or romantic love is in fact a massive opportunity to grow, refine ourselves, and learn to love. Through a shared life, we can evolve into that Satvik state of communion which I witnessed that day in the elderly couple by the riverside. So subtle, gentle, and full of naturalness. That is why in yogic philosophy, family life is venerated far more than a celibate life of a monk. It is through the love and sacrifices, the struggles and acceptance, and the willingness to grow that marriage offers, that we define and refine ourselves enough to realize our fullest potential as human beings. I do highly recommend a book, Siddhartha, by Hermann Hesse, which gently drives our attention where platonic romance can engulf someone and how one attains to ultimate realization.
And then there is agape. Agape, this fourth kind of love talked about by the ancient Greeks. You sometimes translated as charity, sometimes translated as pure love. Agape is the ideal many of the thinkers of love are talking about, and it's definitely what Kierkegaard has in mind when he's talking about love as a gift. And the idea of agape is just, love for the sake of the care of the other. And when you think about those people in your life who you feel like, I would do anything for this person and I have no expectation, if you have such a person in your life about whom you can seriously say this. And I will continue to love her or him independent of whether or not independent of the structure of my expectations of them. That's what is meant by the notion of agape. It was the ideal of love in the Christian tradition. It is sometimes described as the kind of love that God has for us, love that without any expectations from us. What would God expect from us anyhow? What could we possibly offer to God? It is also sometimes described as the kind of love we should have for God, that pure love that brings with it no expectations whatsoever. It's the kind of love, certainly, that Nietzsche argued that in a way we should have for life. This kind of pure love of life without expectations. Let life bring what it may. We'll keep loving it no matter what it gives us. No matter how it fails us, how it disappoints us, how it surprises us, how it excites us, how it frustrates us. No matter what, Nietzsche thought, we will continue to love life. Just life.
Given all that we have heard, what is love really?
Agape is the love that is filled with the purest form of spiritual expression, whose destination is a sacred merger of the self with beloved Lord as God. In the words of Virgil, amor vincit omni, love conquers all. But do we truly believe that this is true and make a conscious choice to choose love over everything else? Indian philosophy gave forth more thoughts on agape, I believe, than any other tradition in the history. Moments after moments, mystics after mystics, they all could witness the nature of agape that we call in wide manner bhakti. or supreme and utter devotion to God. Agape in Greek thoughts refers to love of God for man and of man for God. It includes brotherly love for all humanity. It is the ultimate flowering of love, going from a verb at this stage of loving each other. We literally try to imbibe love to such an extent that we become love. Love in its purest vibrations. Let us look at the Bhakti Yoga or Bhakti tradition that is alive and dynamic in the Indian psyche. This has been going on for the last several millennia in humanity's quest for the ultimate goal of existence. I would like to refer to a particular work called Narada's Bhakti Sutras that are attributed to a sage of the same name, and it contains very simple and revolutionary 84 aphorisms. They explain pure devotion, an alchemic process of complete merger with God. Mere liberation or nirvana is not seen as such a lofty aim. Buddha achieved nirvana, but according to this Narada tradition, it is still a toy. For there is much more to achieve in the spiritual world. Narada's Sutras on Bhakti explains the nature of selfless love. Bhakti or love for God is where all expectations are laid to rest, where submission and faith reign supreme, and surrender is the constant state of inner awareness. Love, devotion, and faith are like steps required to create that ultimate surrender. It is replete with the fragrance of absolute and profound reverence. Bhakti, like many Sanskrit terms, are so difficult to translate into English. It's a complex word. Rather, bhakti is a word carrying complex emotions. Bhakti simply springs from a loving and grateful heart that has experienced the presence of divinity and becomes increasingly attached with that presence in the heart. It is where even love and devotion fall short of the mark. It is sufficient unto itself, and one may even consider that bhakti as the surest path to realizing the ultimate goal of life. Such love-filled marvelous stories are plenty in classical Indian texts, from Dhruva to Prahlada, to Uddhava to Bharat to Meera to Kabir, Hanuman, Chaitanya, Mahaprabhu to Radha. And there are so many unknown figures. Their lives exemplified this understanding of surrender and its might that are beyond rational and logical comprehension. Swami Vivekananda, defining bhakti, said, Bhakti Yoga is a real, genuine search after the Lord, a search beginning, continuing, and ending in love. One single moment of the madness of the extreme love to God brings us eternal freedom. Bhakti, says Narada in his explanations of the Bhakti aphorisms, is intense love towards God. When a man gets it, he loves all, hates none. He becomes satisfied forever. This love cannot be reduced to any earthly benefits. Because so long as worldly desires last, that kind of love does not emerge. Bhakti is greater than karma. It is greater than yoga. It is greater than even jnana, the knowledge. Because these are intended for an object in view, while bhakti is its own fruition, its own means, and its own end. We have so many relationships in life, as father, mother, son, daughter, brother, sister, friend, disciple, And through them all, we project this ideal of love. Love is the essence that is present in all these. At the ultimate stage, after transcending its state of evolving consciousness, we reach ultimate merger with the object of our worship, God. We begin with love for ourselves, with unfair expectations that make our love very selfish. But if there is earnest craving, in the end, there comes a blaze when, in surrender, in acceptance, and dissolution of the individual consciousness, we become one with the infinite. In Swami Vivekananda's beautiful words, man gets transmuted in the presence of this light of love, and he realizes at last the beautiful, inspiring truth that love, the lover, and beloved are one. Meditation is attending to the divine presence in our heart with focused mind that results in adoration of the divine. Birth of such an adoration, simply put, is the beginning of bhakti or agape. Thank you, Clancy. It has been a wonderful journey of so many questions and so many heartfelt answers coming from your heart. I truly appreciate your responses and the knowledge that I have gained. It has truly been inspiring. Hope one day we can meet in person and interact more in detail, perhaps make it more experiential. Thank you.
This concludes the final episode of the Compass series. We thank Professor Clancy Martin and Daaji for taking us on this fascinating voyage. We also thank you, our viewers, for joining us on this exploration. We hope this series has been beneficial to you. Once again, thank you.